Thanks for the opportunity. And let's begin by talking about Maruti Suzuki, which is not just a household name in India. It is the epitome of manufacturing success of the country. It is what Made in India stands for. And the world of personal mobility changed after Maruti cars started coming on Indian roads. But Maruti has faced many challenges. And what about future? What about reinventing Maruti and continuing with the change? Well, to talk all that and much more, I am joined by Mr. C Bhargava, Chairman, Maruti Suzuki. He's a doyen of automobile industry in India as well. Well, thanks for talking to us here, sir. And let's begin by going into history first. And I would like to you to throw some light on how a small car, Maruti, gave birth to a billion dreams. How it all started. Can you tell us briefly about the history when it started? You must be knowing. How the history of the Maruti Suzuki, how it happened, how a small car started or gave birth to a billion dreams.
I think most people are aware of the history of Maruti, though I would imagine some of the younger generation now may have forgotten how Maruti came into existence. The decision to manufacture cars in the public sector was taken at a time when socialism and socialistic planning was at its height, and private cars were not a product which was encouraged by anyone. The reason Maruti got actually created was because Sanjay Gandhi, who was planning to make a small car, hadn't succeeded for a decade, unfortunately died in an air crash. And the Prime Minister, Mrs. Gandhi, decided that his ambition to make a small car should not be allowed to die with him, even though cars were not part of the socialist planning system. And that's why she and the government decided to create a public sector company to manufacture cars against all policies at that time. It was a one-off kind of deviation from policy. And then Suzuki became the partner, and after that it's just been, everybody knows how the market has grown for cars in India. The people in India have huge aspirations for a better life, always have had. They got a chance to buy a modern, low-cost car. And that is really what got this company going, because it's ultimately nothing can succeed if the people don't want it to succeed.
So India is now the world's third largest car market. Third largest car market now. India is. Majority of the cars in India are still being made by you. And challenges are not new for you. Challenges you have always witnessed. What, according to you, is the next wave of challenge that you are ready to stand or ready to face now?
See, India is now the biggest growing market in the world. There is no other country in the world of any size which has the potential of growth in the car market which India has. Whether it is the United States, whether it's Europe, whether it's Japan, whether it's China, all these countries have now become saturated in terms of their ability to absorb more cars. And all these countries really are not having any growth in their market. Their production is a replacement kind of situation. India is the only country which has still a lot of distance to go before the market becomes saturated. And it is for this reason that in the last 15, 20 years, almost every car manufacturer in the world has found his way into India, and those who haven't come are still looking to come. Now because they think that the changing technologies and requirements give them an opportunity which they might have missed earlier. So the Indian car market is going to be a growing car market. Equally, it is going to be a highly competitive car market. It has been a competitive car market for the last 15 years. Is going to continue to grow to be a very competitive market. In any competitive market, the beneficiary is always the customer. And to get the customer to buy your cars, companies have to work to bring the best of technologies, the best of products, the greatest reliability in the products, the best of after-sales service. That's what Maruti has been trying to do all these 40 years. That is what we will continue to do, and we will continue to see that we make our best efforts to keep a large part of the market under our control.
Let's shift focus to manufacturing sector. Now, manufacturing sector of the country, a large part of it is contributed by you. You are what Make in India stands for. 20% of GDP overall is contributed by manufacturing sector. But according to you, what is happening now, manufacturing sector? Is it really the way we should be growing? About policies? What do you think about the manufacturing sector of India?
I think you've raised a very important point, Sumit, because as the Prime Minister pointed out in 2014, if we are to solve our problems of poverty, if we are to create enough employment for the large numbers of young people who are joining the workforce, and if we are going to have greater equity in our society, all of this would only be possible if manufacturing sector grows faster and we reach at least 25% of GDP through the manufacturing sector. To get to this point, the center over the last 9 years and 10 years now has been making a series of reforms and improvements in the environment. The ease of doing business, as you know, we used to be somewhere 140, 150 at one time. We have come down to 62. A lot of tax reforms have happened. GST has come in. Tax rates have come down. More than 1,000 old acts have been abolished. And a whole series of reforms have happened, all designed to make it easier to do business in India, easier to be more competitive in manufacturing. Unfortunately, the results are not yet apparent. Manufacturing growth continues, and the reason I think is that the bulk of the interaction of manufacturers, entrepreneurs is with the state government. And in state governments, the bureaucracy, the entire administration is still not changed the way the central government has changed. And there are lots of delays. Time is not a factor which is valued highly by most people in the states. And the attitude of administration is very much similar to what it used to be in the license and control days, that the job of the bureaucracy, the job of the civil servant is to control rather than facilitate. And that change has not happened. I think along with that, the entrepreneurs also are largely maintaining a mindset and practices which were developed during the license and control Raj. Because in those days, private sector was not in a position to grow or in any way innovate, because the license laid down every condition of their functioning. Now, that resulted in various malpractices developing. We are all aware of the growth of black money in the country. We are all aware of what black money growth meant in terms of ostentatious consumption. Now, if you look around, I doubt if any one of us here will be able to say that ostentatious consumption has gone down in India. If at all it has happened in the opposite direction, that people now like to show how much they can spend on a grandchild's birthday or some such event. And the race is that, oh, that guy spent 20 crores, I must spend 25 crores to show that I have more money than he has. So as long as the system continues where entrepreneurs, businessmen are more concerned about showing off their personal wealth and generating personal incomes and are not so much focused on growing their companies, I'm afraid the growth rates will not go up. But just give the example of Maruti. Maruti grew at a time when all the conditions were unfavorable. Whatever Mr. Modi has made it easier to do business now were not there in that time. Many of the other things which have happened, which have made it easier to do business, were not there. For example, the communications which we have today, the kind of productivity that you have because of all the computers and things. In 80s and 90s, we didn't have these things. We were still using typewriters and we were using fax machines and copiers and all kinds of things. It was very, very slow work. But we still managed to become highly competitive. We started exporting cars in 1990, few years after we started. We could still do that. Today, with all the ease which is available in this country, why are our entrepreneurs not able to grow faster? I think that's something which AIMA and other industrial associations should look at, that what is it that, just blaming government and saying that government should do something, government is not changing labor laws, government is not changing this law. I don't think that is the reason. I think if we have to look ourselves, that have we changed enough from the days of the license Raj? I think that is really what needs to be done.
After COVID, we were adopting this China was 1+1 policy. We were hopeful that companies will come to India, looking at India as an alternate base for manufacturing. You think it's on track? It was a good, the China +1 policy we were adopting, we were looking forward to or hopeful of, that India will be an alternative to China when it comes to manufacturing. You think that is something we still should be hopeful of? It should be still be thinking of that companies will come and manufacture in India because of that?
See, companies are moving out of China, that's a fact. I think there's a great awareness amongst a lot of companies all over the world that they need to de-risk their supply chains, and total dependence on one country is not a good idea. But they don't think that the only option they have is India. If you look at what's happening, a lot of the people who are moving out of China have gone to Vietnam. Now, it's something which we should think about. Why is it that people are preferring to go to Vietnam and not come to India? And is it still that things are not happening in India the way they should? And that's where I think the whole atmosphere of management and the kind of assistance and time which is taken is something which we need to look at. Things are changing. I think it's not that nobody's coming into India. You look at what Apple is doing, and other companies are doing. Foxconn has come in here, therefore. That's happening, but it's not happening on a large enough scale. Manufacturing growth in India is still about 5% a year. We need to get up to 12% a year. That's the kind of change which is needed, and which will not happen unless everybody involved in this business, whether it's people who are vendors, people who are dealers, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are large industrialists, they all decide that our first priority is to grow our companies, not our personal wealth.
Okay, sir. Moving forward and shifting focus to the future challenges, reinventing Maruti. Now, government is more focused on safety of the cars. Bharat NCAP, those norms have come. Technology is changing every week, month, year, every time. Earlier, those were not as fast as which is now. What about these future challenges? How Maruti Suzuki is now standing to maybe tackle those challenges, and how are you giving a vision to the company to tackle these challenges?
See, safety is something which we cannot compromise on. And especially if you look at the numbers, which I'll just mention to you, India has now in 2021, we had over 153,000 deaths on road accidents. It has been going up. It has been going up despite all the new regulations which have come in to make vehicles safer. We had no regulations till 2010 almost. 2000 actually, BS1 came in 2000. 2010 we got into BS4. Much safer cars compared to. But despite the safety of the cars, the number of accidents and the number of deaths have been going up. We therefore have to continue to do what the government is doing, more and more standards to prevent deaths happening. But at the same time, we cannot get safety on the roads unless a number of other things happen. The process of teaching people how to drive and testing people before they get licenses. If you look at what happens in India compared to what happens even in Middle Eastern countries or the Western countries, is a huge difference. In India, it's very, very easy to get a license. There's no real testing of the knowledge of the driver on how to drive or what are the safety regulations, in what way should you observe the road requirements of other customers so that accidents don't take place. There's very little which happens that way. And if you start with people who drive without knowing all the safety regulations, you are starting with a huge handicap. After that, there is the question of enforcing the laws relating to driving and safety. There again, I think people who should know much better, people who drive in very expensive, swanky cars, even they are not very conscious about the need for observing what are well-accepted standards of the method of driving. And I think that's the second cause. The third cause is till today, we are one of the few countries in the world which does not have a mandatory fitness certification scheme for cars. And a lot of accidents happen on the road because of a failure of one or the other safety system of a car. We do have a system for safety certification of commercial vehicles. But like a driving license, it's very easy to get a certification of fitness for a commercial vehicle also without the vehicle actually being tested for fitness. And unfortunately, that is going to remain until the state governments again decide that they are going to give greater priority to safety. The two-wheeler segment, which we talked about a little while ago with somebody, contributes to about 60% of the fuel consumption in the country. It carries more people on two-wheelers are carried for commuting than in cars. There's no safety system there at all. The two-wheeler owners, I think all of us have seen how they drive. And in that situation, the accidents are inevitable. The maximum number of road deaths, which I mentioned, 153,000, the last figure that I know of, over 60% of those consist of two-wheeler drivers and pedestrians.
These are the long-term challenges, but in short-term challenge, is demand slowdown a fair and challenge? It is happening in two-wheeler sector, especially in scooters. Demand is slowing down, but in the car market, in the near-term challenge, demand slowdown, is it one of those fears? Though you are putting up a lot of capacity, demand slowdown is one of the fears for the car sector or not?
See, the demand of cars has been in the last 10, 12 years being going up and down. If I look at the car demand from 2010 onwards, from 2010 till about 2014, the market was absolutely stagnant. That happened at a time when we had the effect of the 2008 financial crisis and the government policy which made the difference between petrol and diesel much, much larger than it used to be. It's come back to normal again, but at that time, so that time there were 4 years when nothing happened. Then we had 4, 5 years of reasonable growth, something like 7, 8% growth. Then BS6 came along. The first year of BS6, the car market dropped by 18%. The moment that year was ending, COVID came along. And so we had 2 years of no growth because of COVID. Along with COVID, we had then the shortage of semiconductors, which again retarded production. The result was that the first year, that is 22-23, the year which has just ended, was the first year when production and sales of cars in India actually crossed the level of 18-19. So again, 4 years of lost sales. Now, the future, because of the expensive nature of all the changes which we are talking about, including Bharat NCAP and others, which most companies will have to comply with. The result of that is the projections of growth for the next 8-10 years is still about 5% a year. And that is assuming that, again, no unexpected event happens in India or outside India, which will have an impact on the growth of cars.
So let's talk about diesel debate now. Now, we know that Indian government is discouraging now production of diesel engines and diesel cars. You took this call in 2019 when you said you will be stopping diesel car production in phases. But on behalf of industry, will it be easy for the industry to shift to diesel manufacturing capabilities so soon or quickly?
See, government is not saying don't manufacture diesel. Government is saying that we have to achieve our carbon neutrality norms. And the CAFE norms, as you know, are being enforced in the country. Diesel cars are very, very difficult in terms of their technology in meeting the CAFE norms, which are already there and which are coming. The costs become exorbitantly high. The reason Maruti and some other companies have given up diesel production is because of the cost factor. That if you want to comply with the norms which exist for carbon neutrality, you will not be able to sell the car at a price which anybody will buy. And I think companies are changing. Most companies have got alternatives available with them. And it's not going to be difficult for companies to give up diesel completely.
Let's touch upon electric cars now. Electric cars, you were a late entrant. You announced that now you'll be coming with 6 models in next few years. What about the overall electric car journey? Why did you not prefer it earlier, and why coming with so many models now? And is it the real alternative to India's problems when it comes to pollution, when it comes to sustainability and carbon neutrality?
Actually, it's not quite correct that we were late. I think if you remember, we were the first to say that we are converting the Wagon R into an electric Wagon R. That conversion work actually took place. But then we found that the cost of the electric car was coming to electric wagon-R was so high that it would not be a viable proposition. And that is why we gave it up and said that now let's look at developing a bigger model of a car, because the lower car segment of the cars were not such as could be converted to electric operations and still remain within the affordability region for customers of that car. And so we did that. The market for bigger cars is now becoming reasonably sized. I think by the time we come into the market with electric cars, there would be the possibility of reasonable volumes being sold. We are coming up with 6 models because, remember, by the time we are talking of these electric vehicles up till 2030, the sale of cars in India will be, the domestic market itself will be somewhere close to 6.5 to 7 million cars. Now, if we are to keep 45 to 50% of that market, you can't do it by having 1 or 2 models. You need to have a large number of models to get the kind of volumes which we want to have. And 6 models we feel is the minimum which we require. Even with 6 models, we think that by 2030, only about 15 to 20% of our sales will be electric vehicles.
And are the hybrid cars and CNG cars going to fill up the vacuum created by diesel vehicles?
The hybrid cars, if you look at their carbon footprint, and if you look at the electricity which is generated today in India by burning coal, actually the carbon footprint of the hybrid car today, with 75% electric energy coming from coal, is better than the carbon footprint of an electric car. Because remember, while the electric car is clean where it operates, it is using electricity which is generated by burning coal. It's not a clean car. A hybrid car does not require that electricity. It generates its own from the momentum of the car. And that position will hold till such time as about almost 50% of our energy comes from green energy sources. Then they will come on par. So a hybrid car is going to remain very much a part of the transition to clean energy. CNG is a better product than petrol. And for smaller cars and cheaper cars, where electric cars become very expensive, and there are other issues why electric cars are not suitable for people who don't have parking places, who don't have nowhere to charge the car. The CNG is a better option because if you use petrol, you have the highest carbon footprint. If you use CNG, you come down much lower. So please remember, it's not 0 or 100. We have to go through a transition process to reach 0, but that will take a much longer time. We have till 2070, and we have to find other technologies because we cannot generate electricity 100% from clean sources for I don't know how long. For green hydrogen, fuel cells is one option. Biogas is another option. These are totally clean options. Ethanol is another option. These are all 100% renewable clean sources. We have to maybe move towards these rather than electric cars in the longer term.
So Indian market was once dominated by small cars, hatchbacks. Now the love of SUV is seen everywhere. 60 to 70% of the new cars are SUVs. You have target of becoming number 1 SUV player in the country as well. How do you see this shift from hatchback? Once we wanted to be a hub of small cars, now shifting to SUVs entirely.
You know, what has happened is people have shifted from sedans and hatchbacks to SUVs. It's not that the whole market is shifted, because the small car entry level kind of market has just stopped. It's not growing at all. And that is why a country like India, which should be having a growth of 8-10% a year in cars, is having a growth of barely 5% a year. And that's because there is no lower end market. The SUV percentage wouldn't have been so high if there was growth happening in the small car segment also. But today the total volume has shrunk, so the percentage of SUVs has become higher.
Well, it took one step when you partnered with Toyota, though it's a Suzuki and Toyota global partnership. It's in India also, Maruti and Toyota, the rebadging happening. Are you open to more partnerships? Do you think industry-wide these partnerships should benefit more and more companies and players?
You know, the partnership is between Suzuki Japan and Toyota Japan. There's no partnership in India between Toyota and Suzuki or Maruti. If Suzuki has a partnership with Toyota, I don't think there's need for any partnership with anybody else, because Toyota is the number one in the world. And it has access and the capability of developing any kind of technology which any other company has. So I don't think that the option of looking at other partners is at all required.
Before going to audience for the questions, I would like to ask a question to you. How do you plan to achieve the targets in sustainability and carbon neutrality? Sustainability, environment sustainability, and carbon neutrality, the targets there.
As I mentioned, we are looking at a mix of fuel technologies in India to get to zero carbon neutrality. And this will include EVs, it will include hybrids, it includes ethanol, it includes CNG, includes CBG. I personally see a big future for compressed biogas in India. I think, given the circumstances, we have the largest number of cattle in the world. We have the largest amount of agricultural waste in the world. We have problems with the global warming coming from the waste from cattle, because it generates methane as it decomposes. And methane is 21 times more contributing to global warming than carbon dioxide does. So actually using of animal waste is carbon negative. Similarly, this whole problem of burning of the paddy husk could be considerably reduced, if not eliminated, if that same paddy husk was used to generate biogas. Actually, the best fuel for biogas is paddy husk. There are logistical issues involved, but I think that we have enough requirements of the environment and for cleanliness that we should make the effort to give biogas high priority. As you know, in the Siam meeting recently, the Prime Minister said that we have to look at all alternative technologies for getting to carbon neutrality. He mentioned all of these 5 which I mentioned, that these 5 technologies all have to be looked at. It's just not EVs.